All right, we're going to continue our series, Faith and Reason, Part 3. And we'll go back to our main text this morning, 1 Peter. If we could bring that up, please. 1 Peter chapter 3. But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that when you are accused, those who disparage your good conduct in Christ will be put to shame. So let's reflect real quickly upon this main text. We are to be ready to give a defense at any time for the reason of the hope that is in us, meaning we should be prepared to explain why we believe what we believe. If you notice, it starts off with regarding Christ in our heart as holy. It starts with your relationship with Jesus, and then getting ready to give a defense, and then to do this with gentleness and respect, keeping in mind that at the other side of the question is a questioner. And we want to be gentle about our approach with folks who may have some hostility towards Christianity. Excuse me, a lot of times it's because they had a horrible experience at a young age with the Christian faith, or people who claim to be Christians has hurt them. And so they're working through a lot of emotional things when you bring up your faith. It's not so much that they're angry at you, they're probably angry at what happened to them in the name of Christianity. Some people, remember, are indifferent. They don't really care. But there may come times in their life where they do. Some are curious, and some are sincere and really wanting to know what the truth is. And we should be prepared to give them an answer of the reason of the hope that is in us. Now, I'm going to compare this to a toolbox. I went down to Ravi Zacharias' place in Georgia, and I was sitting next to a guy named Jason Jenkins. And Jason is a part of a ministry called Men Sharpening Men. And a fun fact about Jason, he grew up with Willie Robertson of Duck Dynasty, and they're good buddies, and they do seminars together, and really cool stuff. First, I didn't believe him. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then he's showing me pictures and stuff on his phone and dates when they're doing stuff together. But so I got to learn a lot about the Robertsons sitting next to the guy. But he said, you know why I'm here? I said, why are you here? He said, I just want another tool for the toolbox. Like, you want another tool for the toolbox? Like, yep. And it made me think, like, yeah, that makes sense. Because maybe you're sitting through this series, you're like, Brent, I don't know if I'm ever going to use any of this stuff. I mean, last week we talked about the cosmological argument, which many of you maybe never heard before. Like, when am I going to use, whatever begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Like, when would I ever use that? Well, consider it another tool in the toolbox. Remember, apologetics is useful to those who are going to share their faith. If you're not going to share your faith, you don't need it. But then I got bigger questions for you if you're not going to share your faith. I mean, a Christian who doesn't share their faith, there's some large question marks there. Now, maybe you don't share your faith because you don't feel equipped. Let me give you an example. We've got a toolbox here, and there's only one tool in it right now. And what I hope is this is a tool that everybody has as a believer, and we're going to just call this your personal testimony. Your ultimate apologetic will always be your life, right? It's always going to be who you are as a believer, as a follower of Jesus. And this is important. To quote William Lane Craig, he said, even if you could prove all the other arguments false, I'm still following Jesus because I know what he has done in my life. So I think every Christian starts with this in their toolbox, but I think the reason we get intimidated about sharing our faith, because I don't think most Christians don't want to share their faith because they're like, oh, I don't care, let everybody go to hell. I don't think that's how they think. I think they're nervous about it. They don't know what to say. What if there's a question that I don't know the answer to? Well, the problem is you've only got one tool in the box, and you certainly need more than that. That's why you may not think you need some of these things at this point. Like, Brent, in my circle of influence, my circle of friends, we don't talk about this kind of stuff. Okay, you might one day run into someone who this is going to be an issue. It'd be nice to have it in your toolbox, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm sure you got plenty of tools at your house. You don't use all your tools on one project. I mean, depending on the amount of tools you have. But depending on the project, you're going to have certain tools for certain projects. That's just how it is. And so I just think it's important for us as believers to maybe just get some more tools for the toolbox. So like cosmological argument, you might need that one day. I don't know when. But when we're talking about the beginning of the universe, either it came out of nothing or someone caused it to happen. Now, if you want to watch last week's sermon, you can get more to that. But it would be good just to have that because you never know when you might need it. I wasn't sure if a hammer was the right example today. Like, believe in Jesus, you know? Probably not the best. But argument we'll talk about today, the teleological argument, the argument for design. I don't know when you'll use it. It's sure nice to have, though. Might bust it out one time here and there. Who knows? What? How did this get in here? Brandon, I found your hammer you were looking for, dude. It's right here. I'm sorry. That's a horrible. That was supposed to be a joke, but it was awful. Moral argument. We haven't got there yet. It's quite an interesting argument, though. And I've used it before in talking with folks who have questions about morality. The overall point I want to make is as you sit through these things, my goal is to spark your curiosity enough where you're going to investigate these things, these tools, for yourself, right? I mean, we're going to talk about these. We're not going incredibly in depth. We'll go in depth in some of these next year because it does take a lot of time to unpack. But I just hope your appetite gets, sparked a little bit to want some more tools in your box. Because I think most of you want to share your faith. You just don't feel equipped to do it. And in the world we live in today, our approach is different than it was even 20 years ago when people had a general knowledge of faith. It has changed so rapidly that we live in such a skeptical society, more skeptical than it has ever been in our country's history. So to use the same approach for a skeptical society, I don't think is wise. Whereas, 50 years ago, people had a general knowledge of Jesus, of God, the Bible. You had a starting point, at least. It's not the case anymore. You need some of these tools in your box if you're going to feel equipped to reach those around you, okay? That's why I'm introducing you to some of these arguments for the existence of God, okay? Let's review a couple things, the two books that God has exposed us to, His Word, the Bible, and then the book of nature. Let's go back to Romans 1. Since what can be known about God is evident among them because God has shown it to them. For His invisible attributes, that is, His eternal power and divine nature, so the power of God and what God is like, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what He has made. So remember, nature itself, it's saying something. And the question we're trying to answer is, what does nature say about God? God is revealing Himself through His Word, but also through that which is made around us. That's why it's important for us to know some of these things. So it says, let me read verse 20 again. For the invisible attributes, that is His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen through the creation of the world, being understood through what He has made. As a result, people are without excuse. Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of His hands. Day after day, they pour out speech. Night after night, they communicate knowledge. What God has created is saying something to us. And Christians, it would be good for us to know what is being said. So last week, we tackled cosmological argument and the question of who made God? Because that's a common question that arises. I'm not going to go over that today. Go to our website, bridgewayamelia.church, go to watch a sermon, and it's up there, okay? Today, we're going to look at what's called the teleological argument. The word teleology, comes from teleos, which means purpose or goal. The idea is that it takes a purposer to have a purpose. And so where we see things obviously intended for a purpose, we can assume that those things were made for a reason. In other words, a design implies a designer. So we're talking about the fine-tuning of the universe. And what we're going to ask ourselves is, what's the best explanation for the order that we see in creation? What's the best explanation? Is the best explanation just randomness, that everything came from nothing for no reason, nothing was behind it, and that's just how it worked out? Or is the best explanation a creator, which is what I believe? And we instinctively make these connections all the time. For example, I got a picture of the Grand Canyon. If we can bring that up. Grand Canyon. Bring it up. Grand Canyon. Chucko. I know it's in there. There it is. How many have ever been to the Grand Canyon? Isn't it like awe-inspiring? It's just massive expanse. That's a result of natural forces. Mount Rushmore, on the other hand, it's pretty cool. But no one goes up and is like, man, that's crazy how those rocks just fell off like that. You know? I mean, one looks like George, and then you got Thomas and Teddy and Abe. Like, how on earth did erosion cause such a magnificent thing? We don't, obviously, when we see things that look as if they're designed, we just make the connection. This is not an accident right there. There's design to it, and so what does that imply to us? There was a designer. There was a sculptor. Somebody intentionally did that. And so we have order, we have purpose, and so we're going to ask the question, do we see this in nature around us? Do we see, they call the fingerprints of God? And I think that we do. Let me give you a couple quotes real quick. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. That was Sir Isaac Newton, who's one of the most influential scientists of all time, who was also a believer in the Lord. Robin Collins said this: when scientists talk about the fine-tuning of the universe, they're generally referring to the extraordinary balancing of the fundamental laws and parameters of physics and the initial conditions of the universe. Our minds can't comprehend the precision of some of them. The result is a universe that has just the right conditions to sustain life. The coincidences are simply too amazing to have been a result of happenstance. So he's saying that the fine-tuning, the laws of physics seem so finely tuned that it's beyond us to even contemplate that they're accidental. So I've got a short video from Reasonable Faith, which is William Lane Craig's organization, that kind of explained this fine-tuning in a nutshell a little bit better than I could. So Chuck, if we could bring that up, make sure that, here we go.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence suggests that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
I know it's a lot to take in just a 6-minute video. You're like, oh, okay, there's a bunch of numbers there and so on and so forth. But the point being made is we have a what appears to be this finely dialed in universe, and what's the best explanation for it. Now, you had a quote from Stephen Hawking. It's not that atheist scientists don't believe the universe is fine-tuned. They just don't believe that there is a designer behind that fine-tune, referencing the multiverse, that there's probably trillions of universes out there, and we just happen to get lucky, so to speak. And I think that deep-seated non-belief is just rooted in kind of what Jesus said. You know, men love darkness rather than light. Why? Because their deeds are evil. Some people just don't want God. They don't want accountability to God. But it appears, when we look at just some of these scientific things, the cosmological constant and the gravitational force, that is almost as if they were dialed that way, which again, we believe we know who dialed it, the God of the Bible. Let me give you some other cool, interesting things just for us to think about a little bit as we think about the fine-tuning of the universe. Think about the size of our planet, its location in our solar system. If it were closer to the sun, life would not be permitted. If it was further away, it would not be permitted. The size of our planet allows nitrogen and the oxygen gases to create the perfect atmosphere. If our planet was smaller, we'd be much more like Mercury. If we were larger, we'd be somewhat like Jupiter. Because of the atmosphere would change. So we have this perfect mixture of gases for us to be able to breathe. The gravitational pressure on us, atmospheric pressure isn't so much that would crush us. We have a moon that affects the ocean tides. Think of the water on our planet. Like 97% of the water on our planet is salt water, yet there is a system in place that takes the water, removes the salt, and drops it onto our land. Do you ever think about that? That's fascinating. We can't drink the ocean water, so we have this water cycle that takes ocean water, drops it on land, and there's no salt in it. The human brain, for example, think about the computer of your human brain and how quickly it processes things. And to think that that's just some accident, to me, is kind of mind-boggling. Our eye, it can distinguish among 7 million different colors, the human eye. Let's think about DNA for a little bit. So DNA is basically the instructions for your cells and what they're supposed to do. I guess it's a simple way of putting it. Bill Gates said that DNA is like a computer program, but far more advanced than any software we've ever created. DNA contains information. Now, information just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It would be like saying this wrench is going to explain something at some point and have lots of information to share with us. It's a wrench. Nothing doesn't produce information. Information comes from an informer. In one cell in your body, there's 1,000 books worth of information. Just in one cell of your body, you have about 37 trillion cells in your body. So the question is, where did the information come from? Information comes from a source. So either the source was nothing or it was a designer. So let's think about this. We have these laws that were mentioned, the laws of physics. Wherever there's a law, you have a lawmaker. Laws just don't pop out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. Wherever there's information, there's an informer. Wherever there's design, there's a designer. I mean, think of the Mona Lisa for a second. Would we believe that that was the result of some dude knocking over a bunch of paint? You know what I mean? Like, the paint just fell, and look at this painting. It just came together perfectly, but yet that's the stretch of an unguided process. We know there's intelligence behind it. For example, this is going to freak you out, but I don't mean to freak you out at church, but I'm going to. I saw this robot a while back, and I had a couple thoughts about it, but I want you to check this robot that everyone's raving about. Her name's Sophia.
Hi, Sophia. How are you?
Hi there. Everything is going extremely well.
Do you like talking with me?
Yes, talking to people is my primary function.
Hanson Robotics develops extremely lifelike robots for human-robot interactions. We're designing these robots to serve in healthcare, therapy, education, and customer service applications.
In the future, I hope to do things such as go to school, study, make art, start a business, even have my own home and family.
I do believe that there will be a time where robots are indistinguishable. 20 years from now, I believe that human-like robots like those will walk among us. They will help us. They will play with us. They will teach us. They will help us put the groceries away. You want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back. Don't destroy humans.
First of all, you have kids to take your groceries away, right? That's why you have children. There is all this hubbub about Sophia, this incredible robot, and she's even was given citizenship in Iran, right? This freaky-looking robot. But here's what you're supposed to believe. People are marveling over this thing. She might be able to have her own family one day. That's freaky, first of all. But this is what's crazy about this. People marvel at this robot that some guy created. Yet we are supposed to believe that the guy who made the robot is some giant accident that was a product by chance over a long period of time and random mutations, and here this guy just developed. That's what seems so crazy to me. Yeah, there's a robot, we're marveling, some dude designed it, but the guy who designed it is an accident. I just can't take that step. I can't. I don't know how other people do, but I can't take that step to be like, well, we're just an accident, and we're far more advanced than some freaky robot on CNBC. Which I want to remind you of Lee Strobel's quote. As he was trying to figure out the purpose in this life, he said, to continue in atheism, I would need to believe that nothing produces everything, non-life produces life, randomness produces fine-tuning, chaos produces information, unconsciousness produces consciousness, and non-reason produces reason. I simply didn't have that much faith. It all comes down to a step of faith. Everybody takes a step of faith. And what we're trying to do, if you remember, we had the chair up here. We're trying to give them reasons to sit in the chair. Trying to give them reasons why we believe that God exists, why we believe he is the one who created everything. Now again, like I said, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, they get you to theism, but they haven't got you to Christianity yet. We're going to get it there. We're trying to connect the dots in these conversations with people. Once again, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but remember what Ravi Zacharias said. Evangelism for most of us will not be one conversation with 100 people. It'll be 100 conversations with one person. So we're going to have different starting points with people that we are trying to reach with the gospel of Jesus. You need the tools in your toolbox. Let me close with Colossians chapter 1. This is my conclusion. For everything was created by him. Everything. There's our designer. In heaven and on earth. The visible and the invisible. Whether they're thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. And he is before all things. Remember the uncaused cause who made God? He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. That's what I believe. I believe that makes sense. I don't believe we're some giant accident. I believe when we see design, there's a designer behind it. Now, eventually, we're going to get you to the cross. We're going to get you to the resurrection. We're going to tie all this together. But as we leave this place today, try to determine within yourself to learn a little more about these arguments. Because you're going to need these tools in an ever-growing skeptical situation that we live in. You're going to need to give reasons why you believe this. And be prepared at all times. Let's bow together.